Welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. Problem solvers have problems too. So here at Behind the Podium, I, Jared Cohen, and my co-host Alexander Ellis discuss the struggles, philosophies, demands, and practices of the coach, or said more broadly, health and wellness practitioner. To provide quality coaching is to enhance someone's life in an everlasting and unfolding way. This is not easy and requires a lot of due diligence and self-mastery on the part of the coach to be able to perform. So without further ado, join us as we dig deeper into the depths of the coach's mind. Welcome back, or welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. I am Jared Cohen with my partner in crime,
Alexander Ellis.
And today we go behind the podium with a coach, Olympic-level water polo athlete, graduate from John F. Kennedy University with a master's in sports psychology, father, husband, fan of the Big Lebowski, lover of his wife's meatballs, an avid wrestler when facing off with his 4-year-old son. Specifically, this guest of ours is the official mental skills coach for the USA Water Polo Olympic Development Program. He has written articles on sports psychology topics that have been featured on the following websites: waterpoloplanet.com, bridgeathletic.com, and cap7.com. Moreover, our guest today is an ASP certified consultant whom runs his own private practice located in the San Diego area, where he works with all types of individuals, not just water polo athletes, interested in enhancing their mental game so they can become more empowered with psychological skills to be a better version of themselves daily and during high-pressure situations. For those that don't know, ASP stands for the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. And without further ado, it is mine and Alex's pleasure to welcome Brian Alexander to Behind the Podium.
Hey guys. Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. Our listeners might be familiar with Katie McKee, who we've had on twice now, and Katie, like Brian, is a alum of John F. Kennedy University with a master's in sports psychology, and similarly, my relationship with Brian comes from being a student at John F. Kennedy in sports psychology, and I've been really fortunate over the more recent past 7 and 8 months to have Brian as my supervisor as I have been working through the program and doing an internship. And so that now that our work has been completed, I knew it was time to get Brian on the show, and somewhat selfishly was very excited to get to pick his brain about some of the stuff that we wouldn't normally get to talk about. So,
Jared, I have to say I learned a lot more than you think I did from you during those 6 months. So thank you.
Hey, man, for sure. And I think that's a great point about good coaching, that it's inherently more mutual and reciprocal than anything else that is one directional or serving only one party at a time. So I figured, we've kind of gotten into this theme and practice with the coaches on the show to dig in and have them reflect a little bit and share their personal why. But I thought before we'd go down that, for you to tell us why sports psychology, and maybe using that as a starting point to share whatever other background you feel you want to tell that may be relative to how you chose the sports psychology path.
Sure. So I came at sports psychology and moving into the profession of sports psychology, obviously, as an athlete, using it firsthand, learning about what it is, first of all. And I run into that question a lot too. What is sports psychology, or what does a mental skills coach actually do? How will it be beneficial for me or my son or daughter? And so I combine all of my athletic experience and with the U.S. team, and then in college, and then before that, and then combine that with my training from John F. Kennedy University, as well as my vocational training. I worked with a company called the Ken Blanchard Companies, a leadership training company, and learned a lot through his mentorship as well as everybody else's mentorship at the company. I combined that with the practice of basically studying human behavior in sports. And so I came into it kind of picking the brain of the sports psychologists that we use from the U.S. Olympic Committee, who would basically, travel with us. We went to Europe every summer, and then sometimes in the fall, winter, and spring. But just basically starting as, in a one-to-one relationship with him, and then learning that I really enjoyed what he did, and I enjoyed the lessons he taught and how I applied it, and then trying to pick his brain and figure out, okay, what's your path? How do I find a similar path and learn from that, and then just, going from there and deciding this is what I want to do, and eventually taking the first step to do it.
Are you still in touch with that sport psychology coach?
Yes, definitely. He's one of my main mentors, and he's one of, I think there's about 6 sports psychologists that are on full-time staff with the USOC.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
That's so cool. For him, I'm sure, to be witness to your whole journey, from being an athlete to going through the program and now being fully in it.
Yeah, definitely. It's been pretty neat because, before I would just see him at athletic competitions or sometimes at training camps. And now I see him at professional conferences, he's presenting, and I'm learning still from him. Or, I got to go out with the U.S. team to the Colorado Springs Olympic Training Center. And then we scheduled a meeting to sit down and talk about our journeys together. And,
Wow.
It's pretty cool. And then just emailing him, asking for, different tips on how to handle this or that, and, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's so helpful to have a mentor and somebody who's gone down a path that you're interested in, to be able to pick their brains about just everything.
Yeah. Mentorship is so important. And, it's funny because I talked about Ken Blanchard, and he's known for writing The 1 Minute Manager, which is a very popular business book. But he's a top 25 Amazon author of all time. And
wow.
He's written 60 plus business books, and he runs in pretty high level circles, but he's so humble.
Yeah.
And I get to learn a lot from him. And so we have a monthly mentoring call as well. And he co-authored with another lady who used to work with Twitter. He wrote a book called 1 Minute Mentoring.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Especially in today's day and age, where the average person has so much access to everyone, right? And mentorship is potentially a little less informal and maybe intermittent or very short in comparison to our archetypal sense of, standing outside someone's office for 24 hours to prove your loyalty type of martial arts story.
Now you just send them a message on Instagram and like, boom, you're in.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think there's a lot of value to, showing the patience and the grit to persevere through a 24-hour standing period.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I was listening to, I've been doing some research on, this is an aside, but doing some research on Goldman Sachs for one of my business classes, and was listening to one of the former employees tell a story that when he first started working there, one of the kind of faux training experiences was that they had a meeting they had to attend that was set for 5 p.m. and everyone showed up and no one was there. And so like there was this big question of like, you know, like how long do we wait, you know? And so like after a while, you know, like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., people start trickling out. Like, I think this was maybe a mistake and this guy was one of the few that stayed until somebody finally showed at 10 p.m.
Wow.
Oh my
and
God.
was
Wow.
and that was it. Like that was the lesson. Like he's like, all right, just he passed around an attendance sheet, you know, let me see who's here. The lesson today is learning the value of waiting.
Wow. Wow.
And then everyone else that left was let go.
Oh my gosh.
So
Yeah. Great story.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting topic, especially with some of the athletes out there now, is just learning, hey, you may not know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you really want something, stick around, keep, you know, even waiting, keep working at waiting.
Yeah.
Keep working at controlling the urge to want to give in or give up.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what can happen.
So true. But especially because everything else seems to happen so quickly. Like, you know, you can get things on demand in every other aspect of your life. And the things that matter the most, whether it's, you know, your sports career or your business career, your coaching career, whatever, all of that takes so much time. There is no quick fix. And that can be super frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially for someone that really hasn't had any challenges, because lots of things have come easy for them up to that point.
Yes. I know exactly what you mean, because I'm feeling that right now. I'm like right in the middle of it. I'm like, where's the easy button? Is that a thing anymore?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious if when you reached the Olympic team, was that your first exposure to working with a sports psychologist?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was formally, but you know, a lot of there's a few basic foundational skills or areas that they focus on, right, or that we focus on in the field, but coaches, parents, teammates up to that point, they had already primed me for a lot of those areas. It's just a matter of the details and the nuances of those areas and the language used in order to package it in a way where you can adapt to whatever it is in your own style and apply it. So that's really where working with a professional sports psychology consultant or mental skills coach has a big benefit, is that, one, you have to be a really good listener, right? Not just with your ears, but with your eyes. And then be able to connect theory, research, past experience, bunch of different things to meet them where they're at, meet the athlete where they're at or the team where they're at. And there's been a lot of great coaches out there that know how to do that without really being able to explain how what they know. Right? But this approach is much more intentional and can really be the difference maker in terms of education to help people, you know, achieve really what they want to achieve and know how they're doing it so that they can repeat those achievements and maybe even overexceed what they've done before.
Yeah, because I think, too, I'm thinking back through, you know, my sporting experiences in high school and then competitions for piano, which I participated in, and even in business, like how many times we get in our own way. And how helpful it would be if someone's like, no, just, you know, what about this? Or what if you tried, you know, this method or that method, rather than, I just felt like I was stewing in like, God, you suck, and and like that becomes a loop and you're just stuck there and you can never get out of that.
Yeah. Luckily, you're not alone.
I know. I mean, that's been one of the greatest things about this podcast and speaking to so many other professionals, like, oh, I'm not the only one. Thank God.
you're not alone, but it can feel so lonely.
Yeah.
Especially when you go down that negative spiral of self-defeating thoughts, you know. And like you said, usually we're our own biggest challenge, our own greatest opponent. And we make meaning out of the experiences that we have or the different circumstances that lay right in front of us. And some of that meaning we're making out of what we see or what we hear or experience isn't really top of mind. It's just, barely under the surface, and we aren't really aware of it. So I think like that awareness, being open to your experiences as they unfold in front of you, is usually the biggest starting point for anybody in order to, it's almost like you feel like you're going one or two steps back, but once you really learn that skill of awareness and knowing how to control your attention, then you're going to go 5-10 steps forward.
That's awesome. Now, knowing what you know now and having your own experiences working with a mental skills coach, do you think it's valuable to start younger rather than waiting, as long as you did?
I think so. The only caveat to that answer, I think so, is that it also depends on the development level.
Right.
And the maturity, the rate of maturity with which the individual is on, how fast or how quickly they're maturing. And then there's also all these other factors in terms of nurture, home, social situations at home and whatnot. But, and that speaks to the point where, we have to meet the individuals where they're at. It's never a one size fits all approach, right? So knowing how to kind of assess, okay, how ready is this youth athlete to take in the skills or to learn how to apply them to what they're doing, and as well as how much repetition do I need to use, and the language that I use, how do I need to adjust that to help them understand what it is that we're talking about at their level, so that they can go then and apply it and put it in their own style. So I think you can start at a younger age. Like I think I worked with athletes as young as 9, and it's very, very activity based, and do a lot of exercises and games and try and make it fun, and because their attention span doesn't really last that long anyway. So I want to make it really hands on, and that helps them learn. But then the debrief for how we connect it to whatever sport they're playing is everything. So that takes a little bit of time and getting to know them, and through our time together, just observe and assess and track and then fine tune whatever the lessons are, how I'm interacting with them.
Well, I think what's interesting about that too, going back to what you said before, there's this sort of intentional change now within the field and potentially coaching and education in general, which is, can we identify more of the essential, repeatable principles so that there is some methodology, there is some structure that can be taught and can be trained and can be refined, as opposed to the more hand-me-down approach of the acclaimed coaches that did everything by instinct. And so potentially, if we're in a educational format training these coaches of youth athletes or youth individuals in any capacity, these basic principles, then they can almost deliver these types of skills in a incognito way.
Yeah.
That it doesn't have to be like necessarily a 9-year-old meeting with a mental skills coach or a sports psychologist, but rather they're actually, without realizing it, getting all the underpinnings of what that work would be, but within the general curriculum of maybe even just the academic classroom or the gym class, or whatever the recreational after-school sports program is that they're involved in. And then in some ways, maybe they have already groomed so much of that mental capacity and resilience and outlook that now they're in high school athletics and have these foundations that almost exist autonomously.
Mm-hmm. Well, think about how easy it is to become a coach.
Yeah.
Especially at a younger level. There's no training.
Yeah.
Unless you're coaching under the umbrella of some organization that makes you actually go through some coaching training.
Right.
But, I mean, coaches, especially at a younger age, they're really those mentors, and they're teaching these athletes, these young athletes, life skills.
Yeah.
I always believe sports are a vehicle for life if you know how to translate and transfer the skills into other things you do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So these coaches, not only are they important role models, but they're also instilling values and beliefs and morals and just, certain ways of functioning that these kids are going to take into other areas of their life, even though they see themselves as a baseball player or a football player or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't operate in a silo. So I think that's a really important point. Being able to get more face time and educate the coaches on different aspects of mental performance leads them into, help mold and shape people into more successful people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just thinking of all the bad experiences I had with my high school coach. But in outside of the U.S., are there stricter coaching programs? You can't just walk on to a high school and say you're a coach.
Yeah, I believe the UK has probably the most regimented requirements to becoming a coach, especially as you move up in levels.
Mm-hmm.
They have more coaching programs or certification programs or, educational degrees in that profession than we do as a country.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I think they're kind of leading the way in this area. There's probably other countries that require it as well, but
I was listening to Bo Hansen of Athletic Assessments and the Olympic rower, and he's from Australia, and he was talking about that critical difference, at least as a starting point, that in Australia there's a whole that if you want to coach anything, even at a youth level, there's this kind of core class that everybody takes to be considered for the job in the first place. So there's that unifying starting point.
With that said, though,
yeah,
and Ken Ravizza is always one of the first people to point this out. It is crucial to go out and gain that experience of working with youth, even if you don't have any before.
Oh yeah, right.
But that's all part of training. You should combine that with academic training or educational, courses or whatever.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about what would be a ideal, if there is one, order of operations for those different exposures. Does it, for instance, if you're going to pursue an MBA, should you have spent 2 to 3 years in the business world before you then step into the classroom, so you actually have a context, a container to apply all this information with? Or should you start in the classroom, right? So that you then go out there and actually, so similarly with coaching, what would be kind of the order of operations for that?
Yeah. Think about the active classroom.
Yeah.
That concept, think learning while doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
right.
That's pretty tough to beat, I think. But in order to do that, you need the right level of instruction.
Yeah.
And the right level of guidance and supervision to make you aware of mistakes that you may not even know you're making.
Totally.
Right. And then with that right level of supervision, and maybe it's not like, oh, stopping them and saying, you're doing this wrong. Maybe it's more of, okay, this is what happened. Let's redirect you to what could be better, enhance this experience, either for the results that you're trying to accomplish, or enhance the experience for the people that you're serving in your role.
So what was your timeline as it relates to being an Olympic level water polo athlete, attending John F. Kennedy for a master's in sports psychology, and then also working with Ken Blanchard? Like, what was the order that those took place, and where was the overlap? Okay,
so I was an athlete before Ken Blanchard, before my graduate program. I went to UC Santa Barbara for my undergraduate degree in psychology.
Okay.
And as I was finishing my last quarter, I actually got a contract to go play professionally in Spain. So I left midway through the quarter while still trying to keep up with
oh my gosh
and everything from my classmates. And then I went back to Santa Barbara from Spain for a week to take my finals, to then go back and continue on with the season.
Oh my gosh.
So that's kind of this balance that there's a lot of athletes, I think, that do that, actually.
Yeah, I went to school with somebody who did that as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can be done.
Yeah.
And I did it. But then I just knew, like, I have this opportunity to play at the highest level, and this has always been a dream of mine, so I'm going to go pursue it, and I'm going to make everything else work as well, because I wanted a college degree, obviously.
Right.
So I'm always a firm believer of integrating, rather than trying to separate and juggle and balance. Right. So then, I went through the national team for 10 years and got to play overseas in Europe, and I played in Australia as well for 2 years, but I was over professionally for 5 years in different leagues, and it's just you're living out of a suitcase, right? And there's so many families out there that helped me out, brought me in, supported me. I mean, it's amazing the level of support that you receive, but yeah, just learning how to be humble in those situations, but also grateful for the opportunity you have, as well as ambitious to continue to push yourself to go for that dream achievement, right? To go for that long-term goal that, no matter what obstacle comes up, you find a way, you persevere through it. So that was part of it. But then as I was nearing kind of the end of where I was kind of starting to feel like, all right, I'm getting to the point. I had been married already for a year and a half, and I was kind of seeing the writing on the wall. Plus, I also realized that, I'm at that point, I was 6 years out of college, and I was starting to feel the pressure of not having any real work experience in a business setting. So, luckily enough, through my wife's family, we knew Ken Blanchard. And I met him a few times. I started talking to him about what he did, and it sounded awesome, kind of in line with what I had always kind of thought I'd want to do in the next phase of my career and my life. So in 2011, I didn't have anywhere to go play professionally, plus our coach wanted us to stay for in the beginning of 2012 to train for the Olympics full-time instead of going overseas. So I asked him, is there any opportunity in the company? And he said, yeah, sure. Just, show up here and you can meet with this lady, and we'll see if we can find an internship for you. So I did an internship there in 2011 for, like a couple months, and then I went back and trained. And one thing about my Olympic experience is I was actually the last one cut before the 2008 Olympics and the 2012 Olympics. So I was Olympic alternate. I never really even went to an Olympic Games.
Okay.
Which was another whole challenge for me too.
Right. To accept that.
Yeah. Yeah. But after the 2012 team announcement, and I was an alternate, but nobody, everybody went that was selected. I went back to Blanchard and said, hey, can I, do another internship? And they said, sure. And we had a project. And then somebody, right as my internship was ended, went on and moved on to another company. And I just moved right into their role, and it worked out. It was awesome. And
you were an alternate for that.
Yeah. Just saw it. I saw an open door and just walked in.
You're like, finally.
Yeah. And really not knowing enough about the job to be a viable candidate, but just knowing that I'm willing to learn and work and find a way. So then after about a year and a half working there full time, I decided, man, I'm going to go for this sports psychology career, because I was in a marketing role in the company, and I just started seeing, this is great and I'm learning a ton, but this is not really my passion.
Yeah.
I know that if I continue working here for the rest of my life, or just in a marketing role, I'm going to miss something that I always wanted. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to start researching graduate programs, and found JFK, and I said, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to go for it. And we, first of all, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to get in. I hope I get in. I did all the stuff, the paperwork, and applied, and I was like, and they said, yeah, you're in. And so I said, okay, I'm going for it. And I decided I'm going to work full time. I'm going to go to school full time.
And I'm never going to sleep.
Yeah. And I'm going to, I'm going to get through this in 2 years. And we just had our first son right when I started.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be a dad full time too.
Gosh, that's awesome.
And I did it. But I just decided, in order to be, successful in every area of my life, I need to add a lot of structure to my days. So for 2 years, I basically had a routine, and then I had different chunks of time where I, like school was off, so I could dedicate more time and, relax more to the other areas. But I'm going to need to have these priorities followed. I need to exercise, because if I don't exercise, all this other stuff's going to stress me out. I'm going to become very unbalanced. That was one. Family is also really important. So I want to make sure that I'm there for my wife, I'm there for my son, I'm there for extended family as needed. But that's important. So I dedicated certain blocks of my day to that. I wake up, go swim at 6 or go to the gym at 6, come home, be with them for 2 hours before going to work, which is another important priority. Right. Wow. So then I go to work by 9. I was integrating schoolwork and regular work as needed, which is another blessing that I had, that Blanchard, where I was working, was so flexible. It was awesome. Yeah. They really, really helped me out. So then, here and there during lunchtime or whatever, I'd be watching lectures. I was doing the program online. Or I'd be reading, the weekly readings, or, doing the activities or whatnot. And then at night I'd come home, spend a few hours with family again, and then go from like 5 to like 10 or so at night, studying, writing papers, doing whatever I need to do.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, it so goes to show, like, if you have a goal in mind and you just get it done. And I think so many people are just frozen at the thought of like, oh, this is not possible, there's no way I can pull it off, versus trying it and figuring it out as you go along. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you have to at least try. Yeah.
I think that's a really key message, is that, in sports, winning isn't perfect.
Right, that's a good point.
There's always some level of a mistake made. Right? Whether it's getting scored against, there's a mistake. Or it's just missing some small play, some area of responsibility in your role, or, just missing a shot, right? There's a mistake, right? but it's not about the number of mistakes you make. It's about the number of times you respond in the way that you want to respond to, keep bringing your best self to whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So along my path, I made tons of mistakes with that structure. I missed a ton of times when I was supposed to be doing this.
Right.
But then I just thought of, okay, what's important now?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to do now? Exactly.
What's important now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really true. I know I had that very intuitive realization when starting martial arts about 6 months ago, where when I first started sparring, I was like really sensitive to the idea of getting hit so many times that like that was a reflection that I didn't know what I was doing, or something was wrong, that I wasn't capable, or I didn't have the skills to be sparring in the first place. And then one of the coaches like really brought it front and center for me, which was like, no, like anybody that's really good, like they're still going to get hit. No, there's not an expectation that no matter how good you are, you're going to go in and not get hit at all. And for some reason, like, yeah, that makes sense objectively, or like I was aware of that in, watching movies or at professional fights. But like for some reason, internally, I had this different sense of that experience and how I attached meaning to it. And it was like, it took for the coach to kind of be able to open my eyes up to the reality that like, yeah, just because you got hit, that doesn't necessarily even mean you did something wrong. But in this beginner mindset of like, well, I got hit, that means like I'm not good at blocking. And it's like, no, maybe like you were good at blocking, but that one just got through. And so all of a sudden sort of breaking down these attachments I had related to these particular outcomes, and then zooming out further and being like, oh, okay. And to your point, that really resonated with me, this idea that you can still win, and there can be a lot of kind of mess that happens throughout, and a lot of drama, and if you then apply that to the classroom, right? It's like, oh, this is a 11-week quarter. There's going to be some ups and downs. You may have gotten, something in late, or this assignment didn't work out so well, but like you can still pass, right? You can still even get that A in the class, when being able to see the understanding that the outcome can still exist within that process of all the things that are going to accumulate.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I've been stirring with this thought for a while, but perfectionism, and I think this is where people get stuck. Perfectionism attaches you to the past results, right? And I think that's really important to consider, because if you're attached to the final result from the past, you're not necessarily seeing the learning opportunity within the experience that you had.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's also, an emotional attachment, right? Which may cloud your ability to effectively reason and think through what you did and how you could do it better when you're faced with a similar situation coming up, so that you can plan and then go and do it and learn again. So I think that this idea of being perfect, it can push people to kind of, overcome something that they don't have yet, or overcome some obstacles to really like propel them forward if they're focusing on executing the things that are within their control, and then learning from their experience from the past, so that they can plan moving forward what they're going to do in the process, and then go do it, execute that process to the best of their abilities, knowing that if something happens while they're in the middle of it, they use, we talk about this in sports psych world, you use your release strategies, you use your focus cues and stuff to stay on that path and not get stuck on any minor results, but just keep pushing forward. And then when they're out and they have the time to evaluate and reflect, they're looking not at the end result, which they wanted to be perfect in their own way, but they're looking at what they actually did and maybe replaying those experiences in their mind so that they can fine tune it and adjust and go forward again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's an attachment that can go both ways, right? This, you can be attached to the past that it was a negative outcome. You could also be attached to the past that was a positive outcome. And the difficulty in moving forward with either of those, the negative outcome is perhaps you're afraid of repeating that. And then similarly, the positive outcome, perhaps you're afraid of not being able to live up to that.
Yeah. Fear can go both ways.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how much easier it would be if you just focused on what you could control. I think that's just such a pearl of wisdom there.
Yeah, that's a staple, a mantra, control the controllables, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, speaking of controllables, I want to transition in talking about your very recent and fascinating intensive working experiences in your role. Particularly, you, I believe just within the past month, got back from being in Russia working with USA Water Polo, and then even more recently, you got back from Badwater's 135-mile ultra marathon working with an individual client. So, for you and controllables, what did you learn about yourself as a coach while performing your role within these both intensive but obviously diverse athletic environments?
Yeah. First and foremost, I learned that when you're traveling with work, you're always on in my role.
Mm-hmm.
You're always on, because not only, for example, in Russia, I had a roommate. And he wasn't an athlete, but he was part of the coaching staff, but I was still in my role while I was in my room. So there's no downtime.
Oh, God.
So being very, very aware of how you're modeling, your role.
Yeah.
That was everything, right? And then in Death Valley, Badwater, you're not only are you supporting the runner, but you're also in a crew. So there was 3 other guys in our car. We're always alternating who's pacing. So I actually did some miles out there. But,
oh, wow.
Yeah, but you're also working through sleep deprivation yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're learning you're well, not learning, you're just, well, maybe you are learning, but maybe, more importantly, you're just being very aware of how you're responding to different situations or different things that you're experiencing internally as well, making sure that you're staying in your role and you're as sharp as you can, and you're, following your own nutrition plan so that you're, giving 100% of whatever you have.
Mm-hmm.
And within that, how did you carve out opportunities for self-care?
In Russia, I was training for Badwater. I was running every day. So that was helpful because I had an event to look forward to and sort of pseudo train for.
Yeah.
So I found time in the day, outside of the schedule of the team where I could go run or I could go in the gym and work out and stuff. Or, I also would get in the pool at times during their training sessions.
Oh, cool.
Before games and stuff. So that was also helpful, especially me being a water polo athlete, working with other water polo athletes. I was really concerned about my own biases around the sport, because I'm not a sport coach, I'm a mental coach.
Right.
And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't interfering with any of the instruction that the sport coaches were giving them, but I was enhancing it by also applying what they're learning to the mental aspects of performance. So that's always a really big key piece of awareness for me. And then, at Badwater, I was it's 100, and I think the hottest it got was 116.
Oh my gosh.
So I was basically training the whole time I was there, and there's a lot of self-care there, and making sure I had a water bottle all the time with me. And I planned out keywords for the runner and goal times for the runner, broke down the race in different sections. We even created a mission statement, which was pretty cool, and he had it on his water jug in the back of the car. So every time we came up to the back of the car, we saw his mission statement there, and we saw pictures of his daughters. I mean,
wow.
There was constant visual cues everywhere that helped me stay on path and make sure I was taking care of myself as well, stay in my role.
And can we just, for a second, for those who don't know, can you explain what Badwater is?
Yeah, they call it the world's toughest foot race. So you start at the lowest point on the continental United States, Badwater Basin, which is 282 feet below sea level in Death Valley. And then you run through Death Valley. I think the first 90 to 122 miles, it's probably more around 90 miles, are in Death Valley. I remember we saw the sign, "You're leaving Death Valley," but then you go into a stretch that leads you to the town of Lone Pine. And then from Lone Pine, you climb up to the Mount Whitney portal at the end. So you climb, at the very end, you go up over 8,000 feet, and the total race is 135 miles. So it's a pretty long race, and there's overall, with all the climbing, there's over 14,000 feet in elevation that you'll have gone up and then down and so on. So yeah, it's a pretty grueling event in probably one of the hottest places on Earth, in the middle of July.
Why not December?
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's California, might as well. Is it pretty though? Landscape?
It's amazing. It is beautiful.
Yeah.
So he actually, the runner I supported, started at 9:30 p.m. The first night.
Okay.
And then he ran through the whole first night, right? And the stars and all the different you see all these galaxies. I mean, there's no competing light. So it's amazing at night, but there's a lot of challenge to that because really, as you get more tired, you just hear the sound of your feet pedaling against the ground, and you start distancing yourself from other runners, so it starts to feel pretty lonely at times. And all you see is that spotlight from your headlamp right in front of you. And so getting out of, we call it the mental closet, was a big thing that we previewed and used a lot of imagery around, and then also had a lot of focus cues to shift focus to the task at hand, more importantly. So then you go through the next day, and and the way that this race was set up, you actually are going through the hottest part of the race in the middle of the day. So it was brutal. This area called Panamint Springs, you come down the first decline after climbing 5,000 feet. You come down this decline, and then it's just this long straight road to the next mountain area. But it's just a complete valley, and you can see all the nasty heat waves in front of you, and it was a grind. But then climbing up, getting through Death Valley right at sunset of the next day, and then going all night that next night to get to the base of Mount Whitney to then do the climb the next morning. That was also a grind because of sleep deprivation. And at that point, you can see Mount Whitney to the left, but you don't seem like you're getting any closer.
Right.
It's almost like a mirage, right?
Whoa.
And so that was a grind too. And just keeping them sane, we would switch pacers, and each pacer sort of had a different role on our crew team. But that's really where I started coming into play more, is during that stretch when he's tired and he's saying, "I don't know what's wrong with me. I really can't keep my eyes open."
You're like, "You're tired, man."
I haven't slept in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Were there any conversations you had with him, or that really stood out as being breakthroughs or reframes that you felt like had a particular impact on completing the entire event?
So I mentioned this shift in focus or focus cues a lot, and some of them are really just self-talk cues.
Yeah.
And self-talk's the inner dialogue that you have with yourself, your thoughts, more or less. But we took words out of his mission statement, and we used those strategically throughout the run. We also took, keywords like before the race, we met a lot in his back patio. So we used the word patio as a cue to go back to the conversations that we had at his house, right? To remind him of what we're working on. Or we use words like relentless or maximize, right? Because that was part of his mission statement, where he wanted to maximize his athletic potential and, be relentless on the pursuit. So we did stuff like that, and it had special meaning to him, which may or may not have special meaning to the next runner or the next person.
Right.
But, it was basically his mental game plan.
There's a presentation that listeners can find that you did for USA Water Polo on their YouTube channel. It has your name, and then it says mental skills coaching. And in that presentation, you posted a quote, which I think may be yours, that said, "Attention is the currency of performance, not thinking." And how did that play out during this whole thing, and where is that line between the self-talk dialogue that can maybe go into too much thinking versus the attention awareness space of just trying to be and not get too caught up in the rabbit hole that thinking can promote, especially when you're sleep deprived?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it wasn't mine.
Okay.
I borrowed it from the USOC sports psychologist that I was talking about before.
Oh, okay.
But could you repeat your question? I want to make sure I pointed that out.
Yeah, so I really like the quote, "Attention is the currency of performance, not thinking." And so I'm particularly interested within the unique circumstances of Badwater, where that line might be between facilitative thinking through the medium of self-talk versus more of a attention awareness state in which you're trying to unhook from thinking in order to stay less in your head.
Yeah. So this is a really important one, because before I was talking about the mental closet, right? Getting just so deep into your own thoughts, especially the debilitating thoughts that want to tell you, hey, this isn't normal, we should quit.
Right.
So that's the first piece. Not thinking, going to the end of the quote, has a lot to do with detaching from that cycle of thinking. Right?
Okay, right.
So in order to do that, you're choosing where to put your attention. And if you think about your attention, not intention, attention as like a spotlight,
right,
you can choose where to shine that spotlight, whether it's external through what you see, hear, even touch, taste, smell, right, your senses, or you can turn it inwardly, internally to your thoughts. But you can also choose to open the lens to a lot of things, either a lot of senses or a lot of thoughts at one time, or one thing, narrow it in, right? So I think that having those keywords and using your attention strategically to focus only on that keyword, and we set up those keywords because that was going to enhance his performance, not debilitate. Mm-hmm. So we set that goal of using
it's also
them.
intentional in that sense.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that, or just detaching from thinking at all, and that's kind of the practice that's become more popular now, of practicing learning how to become mindful,
Right.
learning how to be in the present moment with what you're doing and your experiences. And so learning how to become present with the action that you're taking, whether it's running down a road, in the middle of the night where you can't really see anything, but maybe you're becoming aware with using your attention to what you're hearing, right? Or maybe what you're feeling through the vibration of your feet hitting the road, as well as your heart rate, finding that rhythm along with your breath.
Right.
Those types of acts of being present help you learn how to control your attention, right? And so when you become fully immersed in the task at hand, usually we call that being focused.
Right, yeah.
But when you're caught up in different aspects of what's going on in your environment that aren't relevant to the task at hand, we call that being distracted. Right? So learning what is relevant to my performance helps you learn where to put your attention.
Are you familiar with Locke Kelly's work at all?
No, I don't think I've heard of Locke Kelly.
So Locke Kelly is a licensed psychotherapist and predominantly a meditation teacher. And he has this book that I believe came out only a couple years ago called Shift into Freedom. And really interesting work within the mindfulness practice, in a sense, like taking it a step further. And so he has this concept that he calls awake awareness, which is sort of it's actually the kind of the most, for lack of a better term, enlightened place you could be, potentially actually just before the one above that would be open-hearted awareness. And the idea is that if you use this metaphor of the sky, oftentimes we're kind of stuck in our own cloud. And so this kind of shifting into freedom is being able to sort of move outside the cloud, and now you're in the sky. Or if you think about it like an ocean, oftentimes, we are this kind of repetitive wave, and how can we kind of remove ourselves from being just one wave and be in concert with the entire ocean? So it's interesting because on one hand, it's a lot of conceptual stuff, but for the purpose of getting you out of your mind, getting out of that thinking space. So he talks about these different dimensions of awareness, and one that he talks about, similar to your point about like a spotlight, is what he calls local awareness. And local awareness is used to shift into these different dimensions. So the way he starts most of his practices is to say, okay, you're going to unhook local awareness from thought. And now if I can unhook my local awareness from thought, now I can kind of start tapping into these other types of awareness. Maybe it's only listening, with my left ear, or just being aware of kind of peripheral vision versus, whatever's in front. So interesting stuff. Something I've gone down lately in trying to consume. But back to your point, just the similar methodology of trying to get someone to disassociate with some of their default patterns intentionally to help them be at greater levels of peace within a sense of being a part of a bigger landscape, as opposed to stuck in their own mental closet or some sense of something that seems much more narrow and potentially claustrophobic psychologically.
Yeah. Well, I like what you were saying about different levels of awareness and how you can actually, within your body, you can actually pinpoint your complete attention on a body part And usually you can feel a certain sense of warmth in that one pinpointed spot because you're channeling all the blood flow to that area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
If you really experience it, it takes practice. But that's similar idea, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
He
really equates it almost like it's like different operating systems, and we're just, our thinking one is just so heavily ingrained and default. What the other piece I like to his methodology is this concept of like shifting into freedom. That it's the language is very intentional in particular. That you're not trying to transcend, but it's like little moments where can you shift, like and the other word he uses is glimpses. You're gonna have a practice where you're gonna have a glimpse into this shift, and maybe you'll get there, maybe you won't, but these like little chunks to practice shifting out of one domain into another, and then ultimately just becoming more proficient in those shifts.
Yeah. That's another really important point, I think, from what I've learned. And, as I'm moving through my life, I like to have informational interviews with people that, experience success, right? In their own way. Obviously, success is defined by each person.
Right.
Right. But some of the most successful people that I've ever met, I've had the opportunity to talk to billionaires even, which is pretty insane.
Right.
Right. One of the key things that they've always said was just being able to take advantage of an opportunity in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's almost like that, not being afraid of failure,
right?
But taking the risk of the opportunity you have that opens up in front of you, right? Well, in order to see that opportunity, you have to be present enough to see it.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
So your awareness and your attention has to be available to whatever unfolds in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Block Kelly has a picture in the book of birds, and the kind of question is, what do you see? And most people are like, yeah, I see birds, but then it's like, well, what if instead of seeing the birds, you see the sky? Because that's, technically there as well in this picture. So it's just another one of those interesting shifts that you're talking about. It's like, okay, I got to be present to what's in front of me. How do I take advantage of it? A lot of times maybe you are present, but you're present to only a part of it, versus how this screenshot is actually, much bigger than what your attention was drawn to.
Yeah, definitely.
It's so interesting you say that, talking about, being open to opportunity in the present moment. I was at a yoga festival this past weekend in Tahoe. So that's why I knew what 8,000 feet was. And I picked up a bracelet, a mala bead bracelet with, the special stones. And I looked at the label. And one of the things that it said, courage is being able to go, not being fearful to go as far as possible. Because it's only those who go that far who know how far you possibly can go. Like if you don't take the step and try and take the risk, right, and know that, failure might be part of it, but you also won't know what is possible if you don't try.
Exactly. Yeah. So in order to try, you almost have to take that initial risk of going for something that you may not even know how to achieve it. Right?
Yeah.
So you learn by failing along the way.
Yep.
And just being vulnerable enough and courageous enough. If you ever, by the way, courage, vulnerability, Brene Brown.
Yeah.
She's awesome. Right?
Yeah.
But I think those elements of success really, they're skills that you learn over time, and you develop the knowledge about your capability set, and you increase your own confidence in yourself that you can go into something without knowing how to do it and succeed along the way through trials and tribulations.
Yeah, the power too of just being in the now is so Be present. So important.
Yeah.
So important.
Practice being present.
Yes.
Yeah. PP.
Yeah.
Well, in the interest of time, we want to shift into some rapid fire questions, give you an opportunity to respond to some staple questions that other guests have also responded to, add to the catalog of answers from awesome individuals. So we will start with a question that I think I've only asked one other person, and that was Rob Wolf. So you are in good company.
Wow. Yeah.
And that question is, how would you describe the differences between parenting and coaching?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I remember this from one of my either counseling classes or ethics classes, where you're playing multiple roles, or you have to be aware of the multiple roles that you're playing, right? So there's a lot of personal balance, and then maybe this ties into self-care that needs to be considered before really jumping full in, right? So with that said, let me just throw something in there. I really believe that I live what I do.
Yeah.
Right. So when I'm going home, and I have two little boys now, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. I want to parent in a way where I'm being that positive example and role model, but also teaching them different morals and values and skills to help them, be successful in life. Right. But I'm not necessarily in the same consulting role as a coach, right? Where I'm, really, practicing all my open-ended questions.
Yeah.
Sometimes I need to be a little bit more direct and
that's true,
authoritative at times, right? So I'm kind of shifting that role a little bit. Whereas, when I'm working with an athlete, a client, I'm much more facilitative, and I'm using my silence strategically to help them, think, even though I do a little bit with the kids, but they're young, so they may not think that long.
Silence can only go so far.
Yeah. But so these are these little nuances of the two roles that, I'm obviously learning as I go too, which is another important piece. Like, I believe I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm always open to new experience and kind of how that shifts my roles as well. And then obviously as a partner and a husband, I'm also in that role.
Right.
So I just, one of them is just knowing and kind of previewing my ideal best self in that role, but another one is just living it and learning as I live it.
What element, characteristic, or personality trait do you bring to coaching, mentoring, or leading that people would least expect or may be seen as odd?
Well, I've been told this before. I'm a pretty big person.
Yeah.
So, like, one, I have a presence.
Yeah.
But I try to make myself physically smaller, and by doing that, it's basically in the way I sit, but also in the way I interact, and I'm trying, act with a certain level of humility so that I pick that person up and adjust the different points of power in the room. Right.
Nice.
And then, I'm a pretty nice guy, which people may not expect from being so big,
Right, for sure. Yeah.
So I try and challenge some of those assumptions that might come up, or some of the stereotypes.
That's cool.
That's interesting.
What does your personal practice look like? Specifically, when you make time for your own mental skills training, what does that usually entail? So,
yeah, this is a really important question for anybody in any field, right? I think starting the day slowly.
Nice.
The first step.
Yes.
So, going through making sure that I greet everybody in the family as they wake up, spend a couple minutes with them undividedly, right?
Oh, wow.
That helps me start in the act of being present, right? That actually primes it. But then having some time for reflection, by starting slowly. And maybe whether it's sometimes, it's not very consistent, but practicing gratitude. So writing down I have a little Evernote app, and writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for and why helps me really start my day with the intention of finding more things that I'm grateful for, or whatever I'm doing. Or, going and getting an exercise in and just really focusing on, okay, how can I get the most out of this? Because I know if I'm practicing getting the most out of this with my focus, my energy, my internal dialogue, my effort, then I'm really learning how to better adjust what I tell my athletes when I'm instructing them to do the same thing. Right. So that, and then as well, I've been trying to incorporate 5 to 10 minutes of breathing practice every single day. Mm-hmm. It's not always in the morning or at night or in the middle of the day, but I tie it in.
Yeah.
And then, setting goals for myself, in a week, I'm actually going to Hungary to compete in the Masters World Championships for water polo. So,
whoa, how exciting.
Yeah.
Man, so much travel.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
International. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get to still compete at a decent level and learn more about what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, finally, we've obviously touched around this question, but I think it is still meaningful and useful to have you answer in as contained a way as you see fit. And that is, what does it mean to you to practice what you preach?
I think it means everything to me, because I see it as we talked about the word mentorship a lot, which is different than coaching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
I see it as an opportunity to mentor, and I see it as an opportunity to coach. And my mission statement, my personal mission statement, is to be an honest and genuine leader who collaborates with and learns from others in order to help them find a personal level of excellence, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So I try and operate by that mission statement.
And as a quick follow-up, what do you think is the main distinction between coaching and mentoring?
Well, I think mentoring is more of a leading by example and by influence.
Okay.
Versus coaching is much more directive, and it's much more hands-on, meaning we're actually practicing the skills together in a very structured way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good too, because I like that. I know sometimes people will think the phrase practice what you preach is synonymous with leading by example, which I don't really agree with, but I think that's a good distinction there, that leading by example potentially lends itself more as a reflection of being in the mentorship role, and practicing what you preach perhaps is more lived through the collaborative relationship of coaching.
Yeah. Like I've been having weekly mentoring meeting, just get-togethers with my little brother.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, cool.
We don't necessarily go in with an agenda or,
right,
with these certain ideas of what we're going to work on, or, a plan, even though, in my coaching practice, I have a structure, but I don't necessarily always stick to it.
Yeah.
But when I go in these mentoring meetings with him, it's more of just, how's it going? What's going on? And then we start talking.
Right. Got it. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. Just hanging out. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for hanging out with us behind the podium. This has been a thrilling start to the day.
Yeah. Thank you guys. This was awesome.
Yeah, I took copious amounts of notes that will all be on the website behindthepodiumpodcast.com. But yes, thank you so much for your insight and your mentorship and coaching for how we can all go out, whether it is an athletic endeavor or just, mental skills. I know now I have so many new tools for my toolbox, and I so appreciate that. And where can people find you on the internet or social media if they want to internet stalk you and work with you?
Yeah. So my website is www.athletementalskillscoach.com. And I also have a Twitter account, which is at BA_POS_mind. And then I also have a Facebook page, and I usually, post all things kind of just daily thoughts or writing my articles, trying to post them out there, posting other people's articles, other things that I find relevant to the mental game. So yeah, that's basically where they can find me.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again. And I know you have a client to run to, so we won't steal any more of your brain power, but I hope that we can have you on again in the future, because I know that we have only just scratched the surface on so many topics.
Yeah.
Real quick, before you go, if it's okay, would you like to share the name of the sports psychologist that has been your mentor, just to give him credit, or should we keep him anonymous?
Yeah. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. His name's Peter Haberl, Dr.
Okay.
Peter Haberl. And, yeah.
Okay, cool. I just figured, we quoted him, we talked about him.
I know. I was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
It might be cool for people to check out his work as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Give him props.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again so much. If you are enjoying the show, please show us some of that intentional love with reviews and sharing of all sorts. And otherwise, we will be back next time. Hey guys, thanks for listening to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. If you have enjoyed what you listened to, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. More information on each episode and the podcast in general can be found at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. We'll catch you next time.